Hi, this is Greg with the National Weather Service in Spokane. It's August 14th, 2024, and this is recording of a presentation that was made to the WSDOT and ITD Variable Messaging Sign think tank. We're going to talk about the status of precipitation, how the summer's been going. We're going to touch on the drought update. We're going to talk about the El Nino status. We're also going to look at the outlook for the rest of the summer and what we can expect as we go into the fall and winter. Let's talk about the precipitation summary. This is the precipitation percent of normal since the beginning of the water year. That was October 1st of 2023. So we're looking at almost 9 or 10 months worth of data here. And looking at the state of Washington and much of Idaho, we see warm colors here. We're talking yellows, oranges, and reds. So that is significant in the fact that those are precipitation deficits. And there are spots here where these parts of the state are running at 70% or less of precipitation. And some of our biggest shortfalls are in the Idaho Panhandle and in parts of central Washington. And as we step through these slides, as we get closer into the more recent weather pattern, this is over the last 120 days, we see a lot more precipitation shortfalls over the last 3 months. And that trend continues over the last 60 days. July was a very dry month region-wide across the Pacific Northwest, with a lot of areas getting almost no precipitation. And here's the last 30 days of precipitation going through the 12th of August. There has been a little bit of precipitation returning to the Pacific Northwest over the last week or so. But in general, we're still running significant precipitation shortfalls over the last 3 to 6 months. Add to the fact that July was a very warm month. We can see here anomalies of 3 to 6 degrees Celsius across much of the western United States, including Oregon, Washington, and North Idaho. That is difficult to do over a 30-day period, over a month. And for some of the climate stations in North Idaho and in the state of Washington, July 2024 was in the top 5 as far as being warmest months on record. And there's a significant correlation with the hot and dryness to wildfire activity. This is from the INSI website. And this is a classification of current large fires burning across the Pacific Northwest. We can see many active fires along the Washington and Oregon Cascades. Oregon had a really tough time, as well as central Idaho, in the month of July, with frequent lightning with not a lot of precipitation, and that ignited a lot of fires from central Washington all the way across central Idaho and into Montana. In addition, there has been an active fire season up in British Columbia as well. This is from a wildfire situation webpage run by the government of Canada. And you can see a lot of red circles here, meaning that those fires are not controlled or contained in British Columbia. Over the last couple of weeks, we have seen some improvement north of the border with some precipitation and a trend towards more average temperatures after a very active month of July. And one of the reasons we bring this up is because air quality can often be dictated by the number of fires that are in Western Canada at this time of year, as we start to get more days with northerly winds and the potential for that smoke being transported into Washington and Idaho. We just talked about a little bit about the smoke. There is not a lot of smoke over the Pacific Northwest at this point in time. We've seen a significant improvement in the last couple of weeks. Going into the third and fourth week of July, it was looking pretty dire as far as air quality, but we've had a little bit cooler weather and some precipitation to help slow some of these fires. As far as active fires burning in the state of Washington, the Williams mine fire on the border of Yakima and Skamania counties is right here where my cursor is. That's the biggest smoke producer in the state at this point in time. It hasn't gotten as much rain as some of the other fires like the Pioneer Fire and the Swawilla Fire in north central Washington. Those fires have not nearly as active as they were a couple of weeks ago. Where we are seeing a good amount of smoke continuing to be produced as of 2 p.m. on the 14th of August is over Northern California with some fires in the Shastas and Siskiyous there, as well as some active fires in southwest Oregon. And you can see the milky white color here with the smoke being produced. And there are also several active fires in central Washington, central Idaho, which are being obscured by some of the cumulus clouds on this satellite image here. But those are the two main active areas of smoke production in the Pacific Northwest at this time. Let's take a look at the rainfall over the last 7 days. Since August 7th, this is the precipitation estimate over the Pacific Northwest. We can see that areas of western Montana right here have seen some of the most beneficial rains over the last week, but there have been decent rains over eastern Oregon, which has been helpful for slowing some of the fire activity down there. And we've also seen a good amount of rain along the Canadian-Washington border, which has helped reduce some of the fire activity in the North Cascades and in southern parts of British Columbia as well. But that rain has come at a price. We've seen a lot of lightning strikes. These are lightning strikes in the last 4 days since August 10th. And we see significant amounts of lightning in the mountainous terrain of northeast Oregon, parts of Shoshone County in Idaho, all through western Montana, southern British Columbia, and the northern Cascades has been especially active in Chelan and Okanagan counties the last several days. Fortunately, many of these lightning strikes were accompanied with wetting rain, with slow-moving showers and thunderstorms. But we will be on the lookout over the next week or so for any sleeper fires that happen to be ignited by these lightning strikes. Sometimes these fires will smolder for days until it's a hotter, drier day, and they can perk up. Speaking of thunderstorms, we had a significant event in Skagit County on the burn scar of the Easy wildfire. This was a tweet that was issued by the Washington Department of Transportation showing a rock and mudslide over Highway 20, the North Cascades Highway, in the vicinity of that Easy wildfire. Fortunately, the highway was closed at the time of the mudslide due to fire activity, but cleanup will take several more days and could be well into next week before all of the boulders and rocks are cleared. Let's go ahead and take a look at a drought update. This is the drought summary from droughtmonitor.unl.edu. And we can see that we are in a D1 to D3 drought designation over much of central and eastern Washington and North Idaho. Some of the driest areas in recent months have been over Shoshone County and parts of Clearwater and Idaho counties in North Idaho. And then we've also got a very dry spot in Chelan, Yakima, and Grant counties in central Washington. far as the outlook from the Climate Prediction Center for how they believe the weather over the next several months, this is valid through October 31st, how the weather outlook for that period of time will affect or impact the drought status. And a lot of the drought that is in the western United States is forecast to either persist or become more prominent or spread and become more significant across the western United States. So a dry outlook for the next several months. Let's talk about El Nino and the status of that. When we're talking about El Nino, we often are looking at the water temperatures off of the equatorial Pacific. This is the continent of South America here, Peru and Colombia along this coastline here. And these are the water temperatures along the equatorial Pacific here. In this box is what often correlates with El Nino and La Nina. And we see a little bit of warm anomalies here designated by the yellows and the oranges, but we also see some blues here. But in general, the waters have been cooling from their warm anomaly, which peaked late last winter. Here is a model prediction of what the El Nino is supposed to do over the next several months. Each one of these colors is a model ensemble here, and most of these models project that there will be a cooling of the water off the equatorial Pacific, trending more toward La Nina. If you want to know what these lines mean, these are the observations of sea surface temperatures here in the black, and as they begin to spread out here, that is when the model simulations take over and are predicting into the future. This OND is the month of October, November, December. So that line in the middle there would be a representative of mid-October. So by the time we get into December, January, and February, we're looking at this part of the graph here. This is a very similar graphic here. It just goes out further and looks at the warm anomaly we had last winter, which peaked in the November, December, January time frame. And since then, the water temperatures in the equatorial Pacific off of South America have been cooling, and that trend is forecast to continue until we get into the winter months, where it looks like it will peak at between -1 and -1.5 degrees Celsius below average, which would qualify for a La Nina winter. What does La Nina often mean for the United States? Well, the polar jet stream is often impacted by the water temperatures, and the prevailing jet stream pattern frequently has the polar jet coming across southern Alaska, cutting into southwestern Canada, and then dipping into the central part of the United States. And that storm track often means weather for the Pacific Northwest, with cold air bottled up to our north. And with the variation of the jet stream, because it does migrate up and down through the winter, that leaves our area vulnerable for cold outbreaks from time to time. So this is the official winter outlook from the Climate Prediction Center for the months of December, January, and February. So that's the heart of our winter season. And it is looking quite La Nina-like. This outlook is calling for below average temperatures, or a good chance of them, for the Pacific Northwest and the Northern Plains. And it is also calling for an active jet stream to bring above average chances for precipitation during that time frame. So if this were to verify, we're looking at the potential of a snowier than average season, which is good news in part for water supply and hopefully mitigating some of our drought conditions. All right, let's back up and talk a little bit more about the nearer term. This is the monthly temperature outlook, and it was issued on the 31st of July, and it is valid for the month of August. These are only updated once a month by the Climate Prediction Center. So we're halfway through this outlook period, which is calling for above average temperatures over most of Idaho and much of Washington. And as far as the way this is verifying so far, we've been pretty close to average with some warmer than average days across the region so far this month. So it is somewhat on track, and as long as we can stay at or above average for the remainder of the month, this has a pretty good chance of verifying. This is the precipitation outlook for August, issued on the same day, July 31st, calling for below average precipitation for a month that we typically don't receive a lot of precipitation. And this may not end up verifying very well, and we'll take a closer look at what's going on here in the next 8 to 14 days. This is an updated forecast on the 13th of August, showing that between the days of the 21st and 27th of August, the Climate Prediction Center is forecasting above average precipitation across the Pacific Northwest, with an active trough coming into the region, with at or slightly above average temperatures for the region. So if this were to verify, we may be closer to average or possibly a little bit above average for the month of August, which is the second driest month of the calendar year climatologically. We'll go ahead and skip over this one. And here is the seasonal temperature outlook for August, September, and October. This was issued the 18th of July. And as we trend into the early months of fall, the CPC has a forecast of equal chances of warmer or cooler than average temperatures for much of Washington, with a hint of trending towards above average precipitation for western Washington. And this correlates to the fire outlook. This is the Predictive Services outlook for fire activity, a significant wildland fire potential map. And it is calling for above average fire activity for much of the state of Washington and most of Idaho. And this is based mainly on the much drier than average conditions that we had leading up to the month of August. And we don't see a lot of change in the month of September, which correlates pretty well with the drier than normal forecast for September and October from the Climate Prediction Center. And I believe that is going to end my recording.